Welcome to Forbidden Tales. I didn't expect anything special from my day. Honestly, it felt like every other day. The routine was as dull as it could get, waking up, running my antique shop, and trying to find things to fill the rest of my time. Life as it had been for the last few years was lonely, not in the loud crying kind of way, but in the quiet, lingering way that sneaks up on you in the middle of a grocery aisle. That's where it happened. Walmart of all places. I was grabbing my usual groceries, my mind on autopilot as I filled my cart. The shelves stacked with cereal boxes and discount cleaning supplies didn't interest me much. I wasn't paying attention to anything, not really. My life was just fine. I wasn't unhappy, just alone. I'd been alone ever since Dan left, 7 years ago. Divorced they call it, but for me it felt like he'd vanished from my life. One day we were a team and the next we weren't. Time moved forward as it always does, and I moved with it. I wasn't young anymore. At 57 the world looked at me like I was settled into my ways, like I was supposed to accept whatever handily dealt me from now on. But then there was him, Hunter. I didn't know his name then. He was just the guy at the cash register, the one scanning my groceries, but he was impossible to ignore. He wasn't like any cashier I'd seen before. Tall, probably around 6 feet 3 inches in, with lean muscles that stretched his uniform just right, his hair curly and messy in a way that looked like he just stepped out of bed, framed a face that could have been sculpted by Michelangelo himself, a jawline so sharp it could cut glass, piercing green eyes that seemed to see through people, and a smile, oh that smile, it did something to me. Ma'am, you all right? His voice was deep, smooth, and it pulled me out of the trance. I didn't even realize I'd fallen into. I blinked, realizing I had been staring for what was probably far too long. My cheeks flushed. Oh sorry, I muttered quickly, averting my gaze and focusing on the cereal in my cart as if it were the most fascinating thing in the world. He chuckled softly, continuing to scan my items. No worries, happens all the time. I glanced up at him from beneath my lashes, heart racing. I wasn't a shy woman, but something about him made me feel like a schoolgirl again. My skin felt hot and my pulse quickened as I threw him another look. God, he was gorgeous. That youthful energy, that charm, it radiated off him. And here I was, a middle-aged woman with a graying hairline, feeling things I hadn't felt in years. My fingers fumbled with my wallet as he finished bagging my groceries. I couldn't help but imagine him, his hands, his physique, his touch. A wave of heat surged through me, making me feel both embarrassed and excited. It had been years since I'd been with a man, truly been with one. My mind was now running wild thoughts I didn't dare express, bubbling beneath the surface. I slid him a tip along with the payment. I don't usually do that, but this time it felt like I needed to give him something, even if it was just an extra $5. Thanks, he said with a smile, his eyes locking onto mine for a moment longer than necessary. I felt my stomach flip, and a warmth pulled in places I thought had long since gone cold. I swallowed hard, muttering something in response, before gathering my bags and walking away as quickly as my feet would carry me. As I made my way out of the store, the cool evening breeze hit my face, but it did nothing to cool down the fire that had ignited inside me. Hunter, that was all I could think about. I climbed into my car, gripping the steering wheel tightly. Get a hold of yourself, Danielle, I whispered to myself, but the more I tried to push the thoughts away, the more vivid they became. His face, his body, his voice, it haunted me. By the time I got home I was a mess. I tried to distract myself with TV, but my mind kept drifting back to him. Every glance, every smile, the way his hands moved as he scanned my groceries, it was all I could think about. And suddenly I was no longer a 57-year-old widow. I was a woman again, a woman with needs, desires that had been buried for so long I forgot they existed. I didn't know what came over me before I knew it. I was upstairs in my bedroom, the groceries forgotten on the kitchen counter. I lay on my bed staring at the ceiling, but in my mind I wasn't alone. Hunter was there with me. I knew what I needed. It had been so long since I'd allowed myself this kind of indulgence, but tonight I didn't care. I propped up a pillow behind my head and let my hands drift down, imagining they were his. I thought of Hunter, those green eyes, those lean arms, the way he moved so effortlessly behind the counter. And as my fingers moved I whispered his name under my breath. What was I doing? This wasn't like me at all. I was a grown woman, for God's sake, not some teenager. But the more I tried to convince myself that this was wrong, the more I craved it. I craved him that night. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes I saw his face, heard his voice, felt his touch. It was maddening. Normally I did my grocery shopping twice a month, no reason to go more often, but suddenly I found excuses. I needed eggs, or maybe some fresh fruit, a new pack of coffee, or some detergent, anything really, as long as it got me back to that register. The days passed in a blur, and every trip to Walmart became the highlight of my week. It was ridiculous, this silly obsession over a boy half my age, but I didn't care. Hunter made me feel alive just seeing him, talking to him, even exchanging those fleeting smiles. It all gave me something I hadn't felt in years. And then one day, everything changed. It was late afternoon, the end of another quiet day at the antique shop. I told myself I wasn't going to Walmart that day. I really didn't need anything, but around 4 p.m., my hand started to itch, and before I knew it I was in the car driving toward the store. I walked through the sliding doors, my heart beating a little faster. When I saw him at the far register, the store was almost empty, only a few scattered customers. As I made my way through the aisles, grabbing random things just to justify being there, I couldn't help but steal glances at him. Hunter looked especially good that evening. His curls seemed a little messy, as if he'd been running his hands through them, and his lean body moved with that same effortless grace. The t-shirt he wore clung just enough to show off the definition in his chest and arms. By the time I reached the checkout, the store was nearly empty. I placed my items on the belt, some bananas, a bag of chips, and another bottle of wine, and tried to act casual as he scanned them. But every time his hands brushed the items, I felt that familiar warmth pooling inside me. Again, when he handed me the receipt, I noticed him glance at the clock on the wall behind the register. He closed the drawer with a heavy clunk and let out a soft sigh of relief. "You're my last customer," he said with a smile, his voice warm and familiar. "Finally get to head out." I nodded, my heart racing with a strange kind of anticipation. Something stirred inside me, a reckless idea taking shape before I even knew what I was doing. As Hunter gathered his things and started toward the exit, I trailed behind him, pretending to rummage through my purse. This was my chance. Outside, the sky had darkened, the street lights buzzing to life as Hunter walked toward the parking lot, his keys jangling in his hand. I followed at a distance, scanning the rows of cars until I spotted mine. Then without hesitation I leaned over the hood and popped it open, pretending to inspect the engine. Hunter was only a few feet away when I muttered, just loud enough for him to hear, "Damn thing won't start." He slowed down, glancing over his shoulder just like I hoped he would. "You okay, ma'am?" he called out, his voice filled with genuine concern. I turned, figging frustration. "It's my car. It's been acting up all week and now it won't start." I crossed my arms, huffing in exaggerated annoyance. Hunter tilted his head, his brows furrowed. "Man, if I take a look?" "Yes, please, I'd appreciate that." He approached, his presence overwhelming even in the open parking lot. I stepped back as he leaned over the engine, his curls falling over his forehead as he inspected the mess of wires and pipes. I watched him shamelessly taking in the way his muscles moved beneath his t-shirt. After a moment he straightened up, wiping his hands on his jeans. "I know a guy who can tow it and get it fixed." "No worries." I let out a soft sigh of relief. "Thank you, Hunter." I didn't know what I was going to do. He smiled, and I swear the world felt just a little brighter. "I can give you a ride home if you'd like. I'm parked right over there." The words were out before I could stop them. "That would be wonderful." He led me to his car, a clean black sedan with leather seats, and opened the passenger door for me. I slid in, the scent of leather mixed with the faint smell of his cologne filling the space. It was intoxicating. As he drove, the conversation was light, small talk about the weather, his job, and my antique shop, but my mind was elsewhere, spinning with ideas, possibilities, and desires I'd buried for too long. When we pulled into my driveway, I turned to him, my heart pounding. "Would you like to come in for a drink?" I asked, keeping my tone casual despite the storm of emotions brewing inside me. Hunter hesitated for a brief second, his hands still on the steering wheel, but then he gave me that easy smile again, the one that made my knees weak. "Sure, why not?" We stepped inside my house and I gestured toward the living room. "Make yourself comfortable. I'll grab us some beers." He sank into the couch, looking around with mild curiosity while I disappeared into the kitchen. I pulled 2 beers from the fridge, my hands trembling slightly with excitement as I handed him a cold bottle. I smiled. "Hope you like lagers." "Perfect," he said, popping the cap off with a practiced flick. He leaned back into the cushion sipping his beer, and I took a moment to admire him. He looked so comfortable, so relaxed, but I wanted more. I wanted his eyes on me, not just in a friendly way but in the way I'd imagined every night since I first saw him. I excused myself, slipping away into my room with the beer still cold in my hand. In the dim light of my room I stood in front of the mirror, biting my lip as I contemplated my next move. I pulled off my clothes and reached for a silk robe, the kind that hugged me in all the right places, leaving just enough to the imagination. It wasn't exactly modest, but then again modesty wasn't what I was aiming for tonight. I let the fabric drape over my shoulders and tied the sash loosely, letting it fall open just enough to hint at what was beneath. When I stepped back into the living room, Hunter was still sipping his beer, his eyes fixed on the television. I strolled in casually, pretending not to notice him. "At first, where's that remote?" I muttered, inclining forward slowly to search for it beneath the coffee table. The robe slipped slightly as I rummaged through the clutter. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Hunter glance my way, just a flicker, a quick shift in his gait, but it was enough to make my heart race. I straightened up, remote in hand, and flashed him a playful smile. "Got it." He cleared his throat, shifting awkwardly in his seat. "Nice place you've got." "Thank you," I said, settling down beside him on the couch. I made sure to sit close, just close enough that our legs brushed. "So," I said, keeping my voice light, "do you always go out of your way to help old ladies with their cars?" Hunter chuckled, running a hand through his curls. "Only the ones who tip well." I laughed, the sound more genuine than I'd expected. God, he was charming, and for the first time in a long time I felt desirable. Like maybe, just maybe, this beautiful young man saw me as more than just an aging woman. We sipped our beers in comfortable silence for a while, the tension between us thick, the shift, the slow burn of something dangerous and thrilling building between us, and I wasn't about to let it slip away. Hunter shifted beside me, his thigh brushing against mine again, and this time he didn't move away. I turned to him, my heart pounding, and smiled. "Thank you for the ride, Hunter," I whispered, letting my hand rest lightly on his arm. "It's been a while since I've had company." He looked at me intently, and for a moment the world seemed to stop. "You're welcome," murmured his voice, low and uncertain, and in that moment I knew this was my chance. Hunter's eyes lingered on me, uncertain but curious. My heart pounded against my ribs as I let my hand slide down his arm slowly, deliberately. I saw the way his breath hitched just slightly, but enough to know that he felt something. He shifted on the couch, and I leaned in closer, letting the silk robe slip just a little more. "You don't have to leave just yet," I whispered, my voice barely audible. Hunter gulped, his Adam's apple bobbing as he looked at me with that same nervous but intrigued expression. There was a hesitation in his eyes, the kind that said he was torn between logic and instinct, between what was right and what he wanted. "And God, I hoped he wanted me." "Danielle," he began, but I placed a finger gently against his lips, silencing him. "Just stay for a little while longer," I whispered with a soft smile. When I pulled my hand away, he didn't move, just sat there watching me, waiting. I reached for his beer and placed it on the coffee table, then shifted closer. My heart was racing so fast I could feel a rush in my ears. His scent hit me, fresh pine, clean laundry, and just a hint of something familiar. Maybe La N.D. home. It made my head swim. I reached up, brushing a curl off his forehead, my fingers staying there just a second too long. His breath hitched again, and this time I could see the change in his expression, something flickering behind those eyes. He wasn't just nervous anymore, he was curious, enchanted, and I was done waiting. I leaned in, brushing my lips against his cheek, slow and deliberate, feeling the soft stubble. He stiffened for a second, but then he exhaled and the tension melted away. "You're so handsome," I whispered. It wasn't a lie, he was a Greek god in every way that mattered. Hunter turned his head slightly, and suddenly our faces were inches apart. I hesitated for just a heartbeat, giving him a chance to pull away, but he didn't. Instead, he closed the distance between us, mirroring my movement as if something inside him had finally snapped. His hand came up, resting on my back. The robe slipped open a bit more, but I didn't mind. I wanted him to see me for who I was. I wanted him to understand my feelings. I broke away from him and leaned my forehead against his Hunter, I've been waiting for a moment like this for so long, I whispered, my voice filled with emotion. I want you to know how much I care about you. I want to feel close to you. That was all the encouragement he needed. He held me gently as he lifted me off the couch. We were focused on each other, on the connection we shared. Hunter pulled back for just a moment, his eyes searching mine as if to make sure one last time that this was real, and then with a soft smile we gave into the moment fully, completely. Time seemed to blur after that, the world narrowing down to just the two of us, lost in the heat of the moment, lost in each other. And for the first time in years I realized then that this was what I had been waiting for. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more videos like this.